His Rolex glinted as he raised a glass of champagne, flashing that billion-dollar smile the tech magazines couldn't get enough of. Tonight was his night. The wedding of the year. Ethan Carter, CEO of Nextlify, tying the knot with Sophia Bennett, Instagram royalty with a cool 3 million followers, and a knack for turning startups into gold mines. "Ethan, man, you've outdone yourself," said a venture capitalist in a navy suit, clapping him on the shoulder. "This is Silicon Valley royalty right here." Ethan chuckled, brushing back his dark hair streaked with just enough gray to look distinguished. "Hey, when you're marrying up, you gotta go big." Sophia floated over, her designer gown hugging every curve like it was painted on. The thing probably cost more than most people's rent. Hell, more than their whole damn house. She slipped her arm through his, her perfectly manicured nails catching the light. "Babe, the Rothschilds want a word about their next fund. Don't keep them waiting." "On it," Ethan said, giving her a quick peck. He was about to turn when the double doors at the far end of the room swung open with a thud that cut through the jazz band's smooth rendition of "Fly Me to the Moon." Every head swiveled. The chatter died like someone flipped a switch. There she was, Lily Harper, standing in the doorway like a ghost from a life Ethan thought he'd buried 6 years ago. Her dark blonde hair was shorter now, tucked behind her ears, and she wore a simple blue dress that looked like it came off a Target rack, not Rodeo Drive. But it wasn't Lily that stopped Ethan's heart mid-beat. It was the 3 kids flanking her. 3 boys, maybe 10 years old, each with a mop of light brown hair and blue eyes that hit him like a punch to the gut. They were wearing matching navy blazers, a little wrinkled, like they'd been dragged out of a closet last minute. And those faces, God, those faces, they were his, mini versions of him, right down to the way the tallest one tilted his head, sizing up the room. Ethan's glass slipped an inch in his hand, champagne sloshing over the rim. "What the—" Sophia's grip tightened on his arm, her nails digging in. "Ethan, what the hell is this?" Lily stepped forward, her sneakers squeaking on the polished marble floor. The boys moved with her, like a little squad, their eyes darting between the glitz and the man in the tuxedo who couldn't stop staring. She stopped a few feet away, her voice steady but soft, the kind of tone you'd use to calm a classroom of rowdy 4th graders, which Ethan remembered was exactly what she did for a living down in Half Moon Bay. "Congratulations, Ethan," Lily said, her hazel eyes locking onto his. "I just thought you should meet your sons." The room erupted into whispers, a wave of gasps rolling through the crowd like a bad Wi-Fi signal. Sophia's champagne flute hit the floor, shattering into a million pieces that sparkled under the chandelier light. Ethan's ears rang. Sons? Plural? He blinked, trying to process it, but his brain was stuck on the sight of those 3 kids. The tallest one, Ryan, he'd later learn, stepped up, hands in his pockets, cool as a cucumber. "We read about you in Wired," Ryan said, his voice cracking just a little, like he was testing it out. "You're kinda cool, I guess. Built that AI thing, right?" Ethan's mouth opened, but nothing came out. The middle kid, Lucas, grinned, all teeth and mischief, and elbowed his brother. "Told you he'd freak. Look at his face." The smallest one, Noah, hung back, clutching a beat-up paperback about quantum physics, his eyes wide but sharp, taking it all in. Ethan felt like he was looking into a funhouse mirror, seeing bits of himself reflected back in ways he couldn't unsee. "Ethan!" Sophia's voice sliced through the fog in his head, sharp enough to draw blood. She yanked him around to face her, her green eyes blazing. "Who are these people? Tell me this is some sick joke." I don't," Ethan stammered, his usual CEO swagger crumbling. He looked at Lily, desperate for an explanation, but she just stood there, calm as a summer day, letting the chaos unfold. "They're mine," he said finally, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. I mean, they're ours, aren't they? Lily nodded, a small, sad smile tugging at her lips. Ryan, Lucas, and Noah, 10 years old, born 9 months after I walked out. The math hit him like a freight train. 6 years ago, Lily had left him, packed a bag and disappeared while he was too busy closing Nexlify's Series A round to notice. He'd been pissed, sure, called her selfish for bailing just as his dream was taking off. But kids? 3 of them? How the hell had he missed that? Sophia let out a laugh, high and brittle, the kind that meant she was 2 seconds from losing it. You've got to be kidding me. You're telling me you've got a secret family with this teacher? She's my ex-wife, Ethan muttered, his throat dry as sandpaper. He couldn't tear his eyes off the boys. Ryan was watching him now, head cocked like he was analyzing a bug under a microscope. Lucas was whispering something to Noah, who nodded solemnly, still clutching that damn book. The wedding planner, a wiry guy named Marco with a headset glued to his ear, rushed over, wringing his hands. Mr. Carter, should we, clear the room? The guests are— No, Ethan snapped, louder than he meant to. He softened his tone, running a hand through his hair. Just give us a minute. Marco scurried off, barking orders into his headset. The band faltered, the trumpet player missing a note, and the crowd kept buzzing, phones already out, snapping pics that'd be all over X by morning. Ethan could feel the weight of it. His perfect night, his perfect life, cracking like cheap glass. Sophia grabbed his arm again, her voice low and furious. You're not seriously buying this, are you? She shows up with 3 random kids, and you just roll over? They're not random, Ethan said, his eyes still on the boys. Look at them, Soph. You can't fake that. She followed his gaze, and for a split second, her face softened, then hardened again. This is insane. I'm not marrying some deadbeat dad who can't keep his past in check. Deadbeat? Lily cut in, her calm cracking just a little. I didn't come here for his money, Sophia. I came because he invited me, sent me a fancy cream envelope to my little house in Half Moon Bay, like he wanted me to see all this. She waved a hand at the ballroom, the flowers, the tuxedos. Guess I brought a surprise instead. Ethan's stomach dropped. He had sent that invite months ago, late one night after too much bourbon, thinking it'd be a power move, show Lily what she'd missed out on when she ditched him for a quieter life. He'd never dreamed she'd show up, let alone with this. You invited her? Sophia's voice climbed an octave, drawing more stares. What kind of screwed-up game are you playing, Ethan? I didn't know, he shot back, louder than he meant. He turned to Lily, lowering his voice. Why now? 6 years, Lil. You couldn't pick up a phone? Lily crossed her arms, her sneakers scuffing the floor. You were too busy building your empire to care back then. I figured you'd moved on. But when that invite came, the boys saw it. They started asking questions. I couldn't lie to them anymore. Ryan piped up again, unfazed by the grown-up mess unfolding. Mom says you're like a genius or something. Is it true you coded Nexlify's first AI in your garage? Ethan blinked, caught off guard. Yeah. Took me 3 months and a lot of Red Bull. Cool, Lucas said, grinning wider. I hacked my school's grading system once. Got grounded for a month. Noah finally spoke, his voice quiet but clear. Did you use Python or C++? Ethan's jaw dropped, a laugh bubbling up despite everything. Python, mostly. You guys into coding? Little bit, Ryan said, shrugging like it was no big deal. Mom taught us the basics. Sophia threw her hands up. Oh, this is rich. A whole family of nerds crashing my wedding. Our wedding, Ethan corrected, but she was already storming off, her heels clicking like gunfire on the marble. He didn't chase her. He couldn't. His feet were glued to the spot, his eyes locked on the three boys who'd just turned his world upside down. Lily stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not here to ruin your life, Ethan. I just thought maybe you'd want to know them." He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in years. The lines around her eyes were deeper now, but those hazel flecks still sparked with something he couldn't name. Then he looked at the boys, Ryan with his cool confidence, Lucas with his wild energy, Noah with his quiet intensity, and felt something shift inside him, something he couldn't put back. "I do," he said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. "I want to know them." Lily nodded like she'd expected that. "Good, we'll talk later. Come on, guys." The boys followed her out, Lucas tossing a wave over his shoulder like they'd just popped by for a quick hello. Ethan watched them go, the ballroom spinning around him, the whispers growing louder. He sank into a chair, the tuxedo suddenly too tight, the champagne sticky on his fingers. His phone buzzed. Sophia, no doubt. But he didn't check it. All he could see were those three faces, those three pairs of blue eyes, staring back at him like a question he didn't know how to answer. Hey, if you're wondering how Ethan's gonna handle this mess, or if Sophia's gonna forgive him, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. What would you do if your past crashed your big day like that? Let me know. The next morning, Ethan Carter stood in his corner office at Nexlify's headquarters in Silicon Valley, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows. The view was killer. Highway 101 snaking through the haze, the Santa Cruz Mountains looming in the distance. But he barely noticed. His head was still spinning from last night. The wedding crash heard round the Bay Area. His phone had been blowing up. Texts from Sophia, missed calls from his PR team, even a cryptic "call me" from Jake Dawson, his CFO. The office was all sleek lines and tech bro vibes. Walnut desk, a neon "innovate or die" sign on the wall, a framed wired cover with his grinning face from 2 years back. But today, it felt too big, too empty. The intercom buzzed, and his assistant's voice crackled through. "Mr. Carter, your, guests are here." "Send 'em up," Ethan said, smoothing his tie. He caught his reflection in the glass, dark circles under his eyes, hair a little messy. Not the polished CEO look he usually rocked. Oh well, this wasn't a board meeting. The elevator dinged, and there they were. Lily stepped out first, her blue dress swapped for jeans and a faded UC Santa Cruz hoodie, probably the same one she'd worn when they met at that tech conference a decade ago. Behind her came the boys, looking slightly less rumpled than last night. Ryan led the pack, hands in his pockets, his blazer swapped for a gray hoodie with a Minecraft logo. Lucas bounced on his sneakers, eyes darting around like he was casing the joint. Noah trailed last, nose buried in that quantum physics book, his blazer hanging off one shoulder. "Nice digs," Lucas said, whistling as he spun in a circle. "You got a ping-pong table around here? Every tech place has one, right?" Ethan cracked a smile despite himself. "Downstairs by the break room. You play?" "Duh," Lucas shot back. "Beat Mom last week, 21-18. Lily rolled her eyes, nudging him. "You cheated. Don't lie to the man." Ethan's chest tightened at how easy they were with each other. Lily and these kids he didn't even know existed until 12 hours ago. He cleared his throat, gesturing to the leather couch by the window. "Sit. We've got stuff to figure out." Lily sat, the boys piling in beside her like a little protective wall. Ryan crossed his arms, studying Ethan with those sharp blue eyes, his eyes. "So you're really our dad, huh?" Ethan leaned against his desk, gripping the edge for balance. "That's what your mom says. I want to be sure, though. No offense." "None taken," Lily said, her tone even. I figured you'd want a DNA test. I brought their birth certificates if you need 'em." She pulled a worn envelope from her tote bag, plain, beat up, nothing like the embossed invites he'd sent out for the wedding. Ethan took it, his fingers brushing hers for a split second. Her hands were still rough from years of grading papers and gardening, not soft like Sophia's. He shook off the thought, flipping through the papers. Ryan James Harper, Lucas Ethan Harper, Noah Michael Harper, born October 15th, 2015. He did the math again, 9 months after Lily walked out. It checked out. "James, huh?" he said, glancing at Ryan. "That's my middle name." Ryan shrugged. "Mom said it sounded cool." Ethan's gaze flicked to Lucas. "And Ethan? That's—" "Yeah, I noticed," Lily cut in, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. "Don't flatter yourself too much." He almost laughed, but the weight of it all kept him quiet. He set the papers down, rubbing his jaw. "Okay, DNA test's still happening. I'll get my lawyer on it. But while you're here, I want to know you guys. What's your deal?" Lucas perked up, hopping off the couch and wandering over to Ethan's desk. He pointed at the triple monitor setup, code scrolling across one screen. "Whoa, what's this? Nexlify stuff?" "Yeah," Ethan said, following him. "Prototype for our new AI, predicts traffic patterns. Still buggy as hell." Lucas squinted at the screen, then grinned. "You've got a missing semicolon on line 47. That's why it's crashing." Ethan blinked, leaning in. Sure enough, there it was. A dumb typo he'd missed in his caffeine-fueled coding binge last week. "How'd you spot that?" "Mom taught us Python," Ryan said, joining them. "I'm better at debugging, though. Lucas just likes breaking stuff." "Hey," Lucas protested, but he was already tapping at the keyboard, fixing the line before Ethan could stop him. The code ran clean, the simulation humming to life on the screen. Ethan's jaw dropped. "You're 10, and you're fixing my code?" 10.5, Ryan corrected, smirking. "And yeah, we're kinda nerds. Runs in the family, I guess." Noah finally looked up from his book, his voice soft but curious. "Did you use neural networks for this? Or just basic regression?" Ethan stared at him, half impressed, half freaked out. "Neural nets, mostly. You into AI?" Noah nodded, flipping a page. "I read your TED Talk transcript online. The part about machine learning ethics was cool." "Jesus," Ethan muttered, running a hand through his hair. These kids weren't just smart. They were him, distilled into pint-sized versions with Lily's patience and his restless brain. He turned to her, still processing. "You taught them all this?" Lily shrugged, a flicker of pride in her eyes. "They're quick learners. I just gave them the basics. Rest is all them." Before he could respond, the door flew open, and Sophia stormed in, her heels clicking like a countdown. She'd swapped the wedding gown for a crisp white blazer and skirt, but her face was all fire, cheeks flushed, eyes narrowed. "Ethan, we need to talk. Now." Ethan straightened, glancing at the boys. "Soph, this isn't a good time." "Oh, it's a perfect time," she snapped, crossing her arms. She glared at Lily and the kids like they were a bad Yelp review come to life. "What are they doing here? You're not seriously buying this sob story, are you?" "They're my kids," Ethan said, his voice firmer than he felt. "DNA's pending, but—" "Pending?" Sophia laughed, sharp and mean. "She shows up with 3 random brats, and you're ready to play daddy? This is a scam, Ethan. She's probably coached them to pull at your heartstrings, or your wallet." Lily stood, her calm cracking. "I don't want his money, Sophia. Never did. I came because he asked me to." "Bullshit," Sophia shot back. "You're ruining everything. Our wedding, his company, my reputation. I've got investors texting me non-stop because of this circus." Ethan stepped between them, hands up. "Enough. Soph, I get you're pissed, but— Pissed? She rounded on him, her voice climbing. You humiliated me in front of half of Silicon Valley. And now you're what? Cozying up with your ex and her little coding club? I should sue her for defamation. Sue me. Lily's eyes flashed, her teacher voice kicking in. Go ahead. I've got nothing to lose but a mortgage and a beat-up Toyota. You, though, you've got a lot riding on this wedding, don't you? Sophia's mouth opened, then snapped shut. She turned to Ethan, her tone icy. You fix this, or I'm pulling my fund out of Nexlify. Your call. She stormed out, leaving a trail of tension thick enough to choke on. Ethan sank into his chair, head in his hands. The boys watched him, quiet for once. Ryan broke the silence, his voice careful. She always that mad? Nah, Ethan said, forcing a smile. She's just stressed. Big night went south. Lucas snorted. Yeah, we kinda stole the show. Noah piped up, still clutching his book. You gonna let her boss you around? Ethan looked at him, surprised by the kid's bluntness. It's complicated, dude. Grown-up stuff. Doesn't sound complicated, Ryan said, leaning against the desk. You're either with her or, I don't know, figuring out what's up with us. Ethan's throat tightened. He wanted to argue, to say it wasn't that simple, but Ryan's words cut too close. He glanced at Lily, who was watching him with that steady, unreadable look she'd always had. You sticking around town? He asked. For a bit, she said. Boys have school, but we can talk more if you want. I want, he said, the decision settling in his gut like a stone. Tomorrow, maybe. Dinner? She nodded, gathering the boys. Text me. Come on, guys, let's let him breathe. They shuffled out, Lucas tossing a, see ya, Dad, over his shoulder like it was no big deal. Ethan watched them go, the elevator doors sliding shut, then grabbed the DNA envelope off his desk. His hands shook as he held it, the weight of it heavier than any contract he'd ever signed. He didn't open it, not yet, but deep down he already knew. Ethan Carter slouched in his penthouse living room, the San Francisco skyline twinkling through the massive windows. It was past midnight, and the city hummed below, cable cars clanging faintly, fog rolling in off the bay. Inside, though, it was dead quiet, just the low buzz of his phone on the glass coffee table. The DNA results had come back that afternoon, delivered in a sterile email from his lawyer, 99.9% match. Ryan Lucas and Noah Harper are your biological sons. He'd stared at the screen for a solid 10 minutes, the words blurring into a mess of pixels. No surprise there. He'd seen it in their faces, but seeing it in black and white hit different. Harder. He swirled the bourbon in his glass, the ice clinking softly. His tuxedo jacket from the wedding still hung over a chair, a crumpled reminder of how fast his life had gone off the rails. Sophia hadn't come back to the penthouse. Her last text was a curt, "We're done unless you fix this." And the Nexlify board was circling like sharks. Jake Dawson, his CFO and oldest friend, had left a voicemail earlier. Ethan, we've got a crisis meeting tomorrow, 8 a.m. sharp. Don't screw this up. Ethan hadn't called back. He wasn't sure he could face it. His phone lit up again, Lily this time. He'd asked her to call after the boys were asleep, figuring they needed to hash things out without little ears listening. He took a swig of bourbon, then answered. Hey. Hey, Lily said, her voice soft but steady, like she was sitting on her porch in Half Moon Bay with a cup of tea. He could picture it, the creaky wooden steps, the salt air from the Pacific, the flower boxes she'd always tended like they were her babies. Boys are out cold, long day. Yeah, I bet, Ethan said, leaning back on the couch. There's something else, Lil. Fixed my code yesterday like it was a damn Lego set. She laughed, a small, warm sound that tugged at something buried deep. They get that from you, you know. Always tinkering, figuring stuff out. Ethan's throat tightened. He wanted to lean into that, to ask more about them. Did Ryan like baseball? Did Noah ever put that book down? But the weight of the DNA results pressed down harder. Lil, I need to know. Why'd you keep this from me? 6 years and not a word? There was a pause, long enough he thought the call dropped. Then she sighed. You really want to go there, Ethan? Yeah, I do, he said, sitting up straighter. I've got 3 kids I didn't know existed till they crashed my wedding. I deserve some answers. Okay. Her tone sharpened, like she was steeling herself. You remember that week before I left? You were neck-deep in your Series A pitch. I'd been sick for days, throwing up every morning, barely keeping food down. I told you I had a doctor's appointment. You said, cool, let me know how it goes, then bolted for a meeting with Google. Ethan frowned, racking his brain. 6 years ago was a blur. Late nights, Red Bull, code marathons. You don't remember. She finished for him, a bitter edge creeping in. I went to that ultrasound alone, Ethan. Saw 3 little blips on the screen, triplets. I came home shaking, thinking I'd tell you that night. But you were on the phone with some VC guy, pacing the apartment, yelling about term sheets. I stood in the doorway till you waved me off like I was a distraction. His stomach twisted. He could see it now. Lily pale and quiet, hovering while he barked into his headset. He'd been so wired, so close to landing that first big check for Nexlify. I didn't know you were pregnant, he said, voice low. You didn't ask, she shot back. I tried 3 more times that week. Once at dinner, you were texting under the table. Once in bed, you rolled over and said you had an early call. The last time I packed my bag while you were at the office, left a note you never even mentioned. Ethan's grip tightened on the glass. A note I didn't see. Because you didn't look, she said, cutting him off. You were gone, Ethan, mentally, physically, whatever. I wasn't going to beg you to care, so I took off, moved to Half Moon Bay, figured I'd raise them myself. And I did. He set the glass down, hands shaking. You could have called later, sent an email, something. And say what? Lily's voice rose, then softened like she caught herself. Hey, Ethan, congrats on your $1 billion startup. Oh, by the way, you've got 3 sons. You made it clear what mattered to you. I wasn't going to drag the boys into that. Ethan stared at the floor, the bourbon souring in his gut. She wasn't wrong. He had been a ghost back then, chasing the next deal, the next headline. But hearing it laid bare like that stung worse than he'd expected. I would have stepped up, he said finally, though it sounded weak even to him. Would you? Lily asked, quiet now. Be honest. He didn't answer, couldn't. The silence stretched, heavy and jagged, until she spoke again. Look, I didn't call to fight. You've got a choice now. They're here, they're real, and they're amazing. Up to you what you do with that. Yeah, he muttered, rubbing his eyes. Dinner tomorrow still on? If you want it to be, she said. Good night, Ethan. The line went dead. He tossed the phone onto the couch, head pounding. He didn't sleep that night, just sat there, replaying her words, the guilt gnawing at him like a bad bug in his code. The Nexlify boardroom was a pressure cooker at 8 a.m. Ethan walked in, tie loose, coffee in hand, and faced a dozen grim faces around the walnut table. They're my kids. Kids you didn't know about till 48 hours ago, Patricia from legal piped up, her glasses glinting under the LED lights. Timing's awful. Micro-X deals on the line. I didn't plan this, Ethan said, voice tight. But they're mine. DNA's confirmed. Jake leaned forward, elbows on the table. That's great for your family reunion, man. But Nexlify's bleeding. X is full of rumors. CEO ditches wedding for secret love children. We're a laughingstock. Ethan's jaw clenched. So what? You want me to pretend they don't exist? No, Jake said, his tone hard. We want you to step down. Quietly. Let me take the reins till this blows over. The room went still. Ethan stared at him, the guy he'd coded with in MIT dorms, the one who'd stuck by him through every crash and pivot. You serious? Dead serious, Jake said. You built this company, Ethan, but you're tanking it over some kids you just met. We can't afford that. They're not some kids, Ethan snapped, standing up. They're mine, and I'm not bailing on them, or Nexlify. Patricia scribbled something on her notepad, voice cool. Then you've got a hell of a fight ahead. Board's voting tomorrow. Confidence is shaky. Ethan glared at her, then Jake. Fine, vote, but I'm not going anywhere till I say so. He stormed out, the door slamming behind him. His phone buzzed. Sophia. He answered without thinking. What? Nice mess you've made, she said, her voice dripping venom. I've got lawyers digging into Lily's story. She's lying, Ethan. I can feel it. Those kids? Probably some scheme to cash in. She's not lying, he growled. DNA's legit. Then she's a gold digger, Sophia shot back. I'm leaking it to TechCrunch. Ex-wife fakes family for payday. See how she likes that? Don't you dare, Ethan said, his pulse spiking. You want to tank my life, fine, but leave them out of it. Too late, she said, and hung up. Ethan's Tesla hummed down Highway 1, the ocean glittering on his left as he headed for Half Moon Bay. His knuckles were white on the wheel, Sophia's threat looping in his head. He pulled up to Lily's place, a cozy two-story with peeling white paint and a bright red door. The front yard was a mess of soccer balls and a tipped-over bike, pure kid chaos. Through the window, he saw Ryan kicking a ball with Lucas, Noah sprawled on the grass with his book. It looked so normal, so real, and it hit him harder than any boardroom ultimatum. He killed the engine, staring at them. Jake wanted him out. Sophia wanted blood. And here he was, caught between a company he'd built from nothing and 3 boys he'd never known he needed. His phone buzzed again. Jake, probably, but he didn't check it. He just sat there, watching, wondering how the hell he'd fix this. Hey, Ethan's world is crumbling fast. Boardroom drama, ex-fiancée revenge, and a past he can't outrun. What's he gonna do? Hit subscribe and drop a comment. Would you fight for the company or the kids? Let me know below. Ethan Carter pulled his Tesla into the parking lot of Half Moon Bay Elementary, the gravel crunching under the tires. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon, the kind that made the California coast glow. Blue sky, salty breeze, seagulls squawking overhead. He ditched the board meeting that morning, told Jake to shove it when the guy called him mid-drive, ranting about responsibility and stock prices. Ethan didn't care. Not today. Today was Ryan's science fair, and after the DNA bombshell and Sophia's threats, he wasn't missing this for anything. He stepped out, squinting against the sun, his loafers scuffing the pavement. The school was buzzing, kids darting around with posters and half-built contraptions, parents juggling coffee cups and cameras. Ethan adjusted his sunglasses, feeling out of place in his pressed chinos and polo shirt among the cargo shorts and flip-flops crowd. Then he spotted them, Ryan, Lucas, and Noah, huddled around a table near the gym entrance. Ryan was tweaking something with a screwdriver, his tongue poking out in concentration. Lucas was pacing, kicking at a pebble, while Noah sat cross-legged on the grass, nose in a book. Same old, same old. "Hey, dudes!" Ethan called, jogging over. His voice sounded lighter than he felt, like he was trying to convince himself this was normal. Ryan's head snapped up, and a grin split his face. "Dad, you came! I thought you'd be too busy." Ethan's chest tightened at that word, Dad. Still hit him like a rogue wave every time. "Wouldn't miss it for the world, kid. What have we got here?" Ryan stepped aside, revealing a sleek little robot on the table. Black plastic, red LEDs blinking, wheels humming as it rolled an inch. "It's a traffic bot," he said, puffing out his chest. "Predicts stoplight patterns. Kinda like your Nexlify stuff, but, you know, smaller." Ethan crouched down, peering at it. The design was rough, duct tape holding a wire in place, a wobbly antenna, but the guts were solid. He could tell from the way the LEDs synced up. "This is badass, Ryan. You code it yourself?" "Mostly," Ryan said, shrugging like it was no big deal. "Lucas helped with the wheels, but he broke them twice first." "Did not," Lucas shot back, shoving his brother. "You're just mad I made it go faster." Noah looked up from his book, deadpan. "It's 12% faster because of him. I did the math." Ethan laughed, the sound bubbling up easy and real. "Team effort, huh? You guys are killing it." Lily appeared then, weaving through the crowd with a tray of lemonade cups. She'd swapped her hoodie for a sundress, her hair tied back with a scrunchie. She smiled when she saw him, a small, careful thing, and handed out the drinks. "Didn't expect you to make it," she said, passing him a cup. "Told you I'd be here," Ethan said, taking a sip. The lemonade was tart, homemade, the kind she used to make back when they shared a cramped apartment in Oakland. "Board can wait." Her eyebrows lifted, but she didn't push it. "Well, good. Ryan's been a wreck all week over this thing." "Nah, I'm fine," Ryan said, though his ears went pink. "Just hope it doesn't crash in front of everybody." "It won't," Ethan said, clapping him on the shoulder. "You've got this." The fair kicked off, and Ethan stuck close, watching Ryan demo the bot to a gaggle of judges, 2 teachers, and some tech nerd from a local startup. The kid was nervous at first, stammering through his pitch, but then he hit his stride, explaining the algorithm like he was born to do it. Ethan felt a swell of pride he didn't know he had in him. When the judges nodded and scribbled notes, Ryan shot him a thumbs up, and Ethan grinned back, feeling lighter than he had in weeks. After the demo, they hit up the ice cream truck parked by the playground, Ethan's treat. He got mint chip. Ryan and Lucas went for double chocolate, and Noah picked vanilla, methodical as ever. They sat on a picnic table, the sun warm on their backs, cones dripping onto the wood. "So," Lucas said, licking chocolate off his fingers, "you really ditched work for this? Mom said you never miss meetings." Ethan glanced at Lily, who was watching him over her own cone. "Yeah, well, some things matter more. You guys are worth it." Noah tilted his head, studying him. "Even with all the money stuff? Nexlify's like a big deal." "Big deal's relative," Ethan said, leaning back. "I built it from scratch, sure, but it's just code and cash. This—" He gestured at them, the sticky table, the laughter. "This is real." Ryan smirked. "You sound like a Hallmark card." "Shut up," Ethan said, chucking a napkin at him. The boys cracked up, and for a minute, it felt good. Simple, like he could figure this dad thing out. Then it hit him, a sharp, stabbing pain behind his eyes, like someone jammed a screwdriver into his skull. He winced, pressing a hand to his temple. The world tilted, the picnic table blurring. Next thing he knew, he was on the ground, gravel digging into his palms, the boys' voices echoing like they were underwater. "Dad!" Ryan's face loomed over him wide-eyed. "Mom, he's hurt." Lily dropped her cone, rushing to his side. "Ethan, what's wrong? Talk to me." "Dunno," he mumbled, his tongue thick. "Head hurts." She grabbed his arm, hauling him up with strength he didn't know she had. "We're getting you to a hospital. Now." The ER at Seaton Coastside smelled like bleach and bad coffee, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Ethan sat on a crinkly paper sheet, Lily hovering nearby while the boys waited outside with a nurse. His headache had dulled to a throb, but his hands wouldn't stop shaking. The doc, a gray-haired guy with a clipboard, came in, his face too neutral for comfort. "Mr. Carter," he said, flipping through scans. "We did an MRI, found something, a mass in your brain. Inoperable. Looks like glioblastoma." Ethan's stomach dropped. "English, doc." The guy sighed, setting the clipboard down. "Brain tumor. Aggressive. You've got 6 months, maybe a year with treatment. I'm sorry." Lily's hand flew to her mouth, a choked sound slipping out. Ethan just stared, the words bouncing around his skull like a bad ping. 6 months. He'd just found his kids, and now this? "What about chemo?" Lily asked, her voice trembling. "Radiation?" "Could buy a few months," the doc said. "But it's palliative, not a cure. We'll set you up with oncology to talk options." He left, the door clicking shut. Ethan sat there, numb, the paper crinkling under him. Lily sank into a chair, eyes wet. "Ethan." "Don't," he said, cutting her off. "Don't say it." "You scared us," she whispered. "The boys, they saw you collapse." "They can't know," he said, voice hard. "Not yet. I just got 'em, Lil. I'm not dropping this on them now." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "Okay. But you're not fine. You can't pretend this away." "I'm not," he said, though he wasn't sure he meant it. He grabbed his phone, hands still shaky, and opened notes. "I've gotta do something. For them." "What?" she asked, leaning closer. He started typing, the screen blurring as his fingers moved. "Dear Ryan, you're the leader I never was. That robot today? That's just the start. Keep building, kid." He stopped, throat tight. "Stuff they'll need when I'm not here." Lily's hand rested on his, warm and steady. "You're here now. That's what counts." "Yeah," he muttered, staring at the words. 6 months. The clock was ticking, and he'd barely started running. Back at the school, the fair was winding down. Ethan insisted on sticking around. Stubborn as hell, Lily said, watching Ryan collect his first-place ribbon. The kid beamed, holding it up like a trophy, and Ethan forced a smile, shoving the diagnosis down deep. Lucas and Noah crowded around, arguing over who got to hold the ribbon next, and for a second, it was almost normal again. Lily drove them home, Ethan in the passenger seat, the boys chattering in the back about robots and ice cream. He leaned against the window, the cool glass soothing his head. His phone buzzed, Jake again, but he silenced it. No boardroom bullshit today, just this. When they pulled up to Lily's place, the red door glowing under the porch light, Ethan turned to her. "Dinner tomorrow still on?" "If you're up for it," she said, searching his face. "You need rest, Ethan." "I'll be fine," he lied, stepping out. He waved at the boys as they piled inside, their voices fading into the house. Then he climbed into his Tesla, alone again, and pulled out his phone. He typed more. "Dear Lucas, you've got guts I never had. Don't ever lose that." The words spilling out like they couldn't wait. He hit save, the screen glowing in the dark. 6 months. He'd make every damn second count. Ethan Carter's penthouse in Russian Hill was dead quiet, save for the faint hum of the city outside. Sirens echoing off the bay, the occasional horn from a late-night Uber. It was 2 a.m., and he sat at his desk, the glow of 3 monitors casting sharp shadows across his face. One screen showed Nexlify's latest quarterly report, stock down 15%, Micro-X deal teetering. Another had a draft email to Jake Dawson, half-written, full of excuses he couldn't finish. The third was blank, a blinking cursor waiting for words he didn't have. His hands trembled as he typed, the bourbon bottle on the desk half empty, his headache a dull thud he'd gotten used to. 2 weeks had passed since the hospital bombshell, glioblastoma, 6 months tops. He hadn't told the boys. Couldn't. Every time he saw them, dinner at Lily's, soccer games in Half Moon Bay, he'd shove the truth down, plaster on a smile, and pretend he wasn't counting days. But tonight, he wasn't with them. He was here, alone, because the board had forced his hand. Jake's ultimatum from yesterday still rang in his ears. Step down or we vote you out. Your call, man. Ethan rubbed his temples, the room spinning a little. He'd already made the call, sent a resignation letter an hour ago, effective immediately. Gave up 40% of his Nexlify shares, funneled them into trusts for Ryan, Lucas, and Noah. His lawyer had called it standard for a guy with your net worth, but it felt like carving out pieces of himself. Jake had texted back, "You're insane. Call me." Ethan hadn't. The intercom buzzed, sharp and sudden. "Mr. Carter, Ms. Bennett's here," the doorman's voice crackled. Ethan groaned, dragging himself to the panel. "Send her up." Sophia swept in minutes later, her white coat billowing like she'd stepped off a runway, not a red-eye from L.A. Her hair was perfect, her eyes red-rimmed. Anger, not tears, he could tell. She dropped her purse on the couch, crossing her arms. "You resigned? Are you out of your damn mind, Ethan?" "Nice to see you too," he said, sinking back into his chair. "How'd you hear?" "Jake," she snapped. "He's freaking out. Says you're throwing Nexlify under the bus for your little Brady bunch. What the hell's going on?" Ethan took a swig of bourbon, the burn steadying him. "I'm done, Soph. Board's been on my ass since the wedding. I gave the kids my shares, 40%. They're set for life." She stared at him, mouth open, then laughed, high and brittle. "You're kidding. You tanked your career for 3 kids you've known, what, a month? That's not noble, Ethan. That's stupid." "They're mine," he said, voice low, firm. "I owe 'em." "You owe me," she shot back, stepping closer. "We had a plan. Nexlify, the wedding, the power couple thing. I stuck by you through this mess. And now you're bailing?" Ethan met her gaze, unflinching. "You walked out, Soph. Said we were done unless I fixed it. I'm fixing it my way." Her face softened, just for a second, then hardened again. "I was mad, okay? I didn't mean forever. Look, I'm sorry I flipped out. We can still make this work. Ditch the trusts, come back to Nexlify. I'll smooth things over with the board." He shook his head, leaning back. "Nah, I'm out. For good." Sophia's eyes narrowed. "You're picking them over me, over everything we built." "It's not about you," he said, though it stung to admit. "It's about them. I've got—" He stopped, the 6-month clock ticking loud in his head. "I've got stuff to figure out." She studied him, then sighed, softer this time. "You're different, Ethan. I don't get it, but fine. Call me if you change your mind." She grabbed her purse and left, the door clicking shut like a full stop. Ethan stared at it, then turned back to his monitors, the bourbon glass cold in his hand. He didn't feel free, just unmoored, like a ship cut loose in a storm. "Hello, my good friends. How are you today? May God bless you all. Hey, imagine this. You're at your dream wedding, champagne flowing, Silicon Valley's elite toasting your name, when the doors crash open. Your ex walks in with 3 kids you've never met, and they look just like you. What do you do when your perfect life unravels in front of 300 guests? Stick around. This story's wilder than you think. Lily moved around the kitchen, humming some old tune Ethan couldn't place. "Pass the garlic bread," Lucas called, not looking up. "Say, please," Lily shot back, sliding the plate over anyway. "Please," he mumbled, grinning as he snagged a piece. Ethan watched them, a half smile tugging at his lips. This was what he'd missed. Messy, loud, real. He'd been to the house 3 times this week, soaking it up like a guy dying of thirst. But tonight, something felt off. The boys were quieter, glancing at him when they thought he wasn't looking. "Dinner's good," he said, breaking the silence. "You guys eat like this every night?" "When Mom's not grading papers," Ryan said, smirking. "She's a pro at multitasking." Lily laughed, sitting down with her own plate. "Years of practice? You holding up okay, Ethan? You look beat." "Yeah," he lied, forcing a bite. "Just long week." Lucas sat up suddenly, tablet in hand, his grin gone. "Long week, huh? You mean like when you ignored Mom's email 6 years ago?" Ethan froze, fork halfway to his mouth. "What?" Lucas tapped the screen, his voice sharp. "Found it in your old Gmail. Took me like 10 minutes to crack the password. Nextlify 2015, real original. Mom sent you a message the day she left. Said she was pregnant. You never even opened it." Lily's face went pale, her fork clattering to the plate. "Lucas, what are you—" "You knew," Lucas cut in, glaring at Ethan. "And you didn't care. Mom was right. You were a jerk back then." Ethan's stomach dropped, the lasagna turning to lead. I didn't see it, Lucas. I swear." "Bullshit," Lucas snapped, standing up. "It's right here. Ethan, I'm leaving. I'm pregnant. Don't call unless you're ready to be a dad." "You didn't even try." Ryan jumped in, voice rising. "Why should we trust you now? You're just gonna ditch us again, like you did Mom." "I didn't know," Ethan said, louder than he meant, his chair scraping back. "I was buried in work. Nextlify was barely off the ground. I didn't see the damn email." Noah slammed his book shut, eyes blazing. First time Ethan had seen him mad. "Then you should have looked. Mom was puking her guts out and you were what? Partying with investors?" Lily stood, hands up. "Boys, stop. That's enough." "No, it's not," Lucas yelled, tears brimming. "He shows up acting all cool, but he didn't want us." "I didn't know they'd dig that up." "You should have told me," he said, softer now. "I could have explained." "Explained what?" Lucas shot back. "That you picked your stupid company over us? We don't need you, dude. We've been fine without you." He stormed out, slamming the back door. Ryan followed, tossing a glare over his shoulder. Noah lingered, staring at Ethan like he was solving a puzzle, then grabbed his book and left too. The kitchen went silent, the lasagna cold on the table. Ethan sank back into his chair, hands in his hair. "I screwed this up, didn't I?" Lily sat across from him, voice low. "They're hurt, Ethan. They've been Googling you, watching your TED Talks, building you up in their heads. That email, it broke something." "I didn't know," he repeated, weaker this time. "I'd have done it different if I'd seen it." "Would you?" she asked, echoing their last call. "You were a different guy then. They don't get that." He didn't answer, just stared at the napkin Ryan had left. Half a robot sketch, jagged and unfinished. His phone buzzed, Jake again, but he ignored it. "What do I do, Lil?" "Give him time," she said, standing, "and figure out how to show him you mean it." She left him there, the house creaking around him. Ethan pulled out his phone, opened notes, and started typing. "Dear Noah, you're smarter than me, and I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." But the words felt hollow. The boys hated him. Nextlify was gone, Sophia was a ghost, and that damn clock kept ticking. Ethan drove to Ocean Beach an hour later, parking near the dunes. The waves crashed under a moonless sky, the air cold and briny. He sat on a bench, the email Lucas found burning a hole in his pocket. He'd printed it before leaving Lily's. "Ethan, I'm leaving. I'm pregnant. Don't call unless you're ready." 6 years ago, he'd been too wired to notice, too obsessed with Nexlify to care. Now it was all crashing down, and he didn't know how to fix it. Hey, Ethan's losing everything, his kids, his company, his shot at redemption. Can he pull this back? Hit subscribe and drop a comment. How would you patch things up with those boys? Tell me below. Ethan Carter sat on the back porch of Lily Harper's house in Half Moon Bay, the late June air thick with salt and the hum of crickets. The sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky a bruised purple, and the backyard glowed under string lights strung across the old oak tree. 3 months had passed since the glioblastoma diagnosis. 3 months of chemo that left him gaunt, his hair thinning, his hands shaky. He'd kept it from the boys as long as he could, but they'd figured it out last week when he'd stumbled getting out of the car, too weak to hide it anymore. Tonight, though, he was here, propped in a lawn chair, a blanket over his lap, watching Ryan, Lucas, and Noah kick a soccer ball around the patchy grass. The fight over the email felt like a lifetime ago, but the cracks lingered. They'd barely spoken to him for days after Lucas's outburst, their trust shredded by that 6-year-old message Lily sent, and he'd ignored. Ethan had kept coming anyway. Dinners, science fairs, quiet nights like this, trying to prove he wasn't the guy who'd bailed. It was slow, messy work, and some days he wondered if he'd run out of time before they forgave him. Lily stepped out, a mug of coffee in each hand. She handed him one, black and strong, and sat beside him on the porch steps. "They're getting good," she said, nodding at the boys. "Ryan's got your footwork." Ethan managed a smile, sipping the coffee. "Yeah, but Lucas has my temper. Nearly took Noah out with that last kick." She laughed, soft and warm, the sound cutting through the ache in his skull. "They're tougher than they look, like their dad." He glanced at her, searching her face. "You think they'll be okay? After you?" She finished, voice steady but eyes wet. "Yeah, Ethan. They've got me, each other, and you've given them more in 3 months than I thought possible." He nodded, throat tight, and pulled out his phone. The next night, Ethan sat at Lily's kitchen table in Half Moon Bay, the smell of lasagna, his new favorite since the boys begged for it, filling the small space. The house was warm, cluttered with school books and soccer gear, a stark contrast to his sterile penthouse. Ryan was across from him, sketching robot designs on a napkin. Lucas was sprawled on the floor, tapping at a tablet, while Noah read in the corner, his book light casting a soft glow. She'd been a ghost since the wedding, caught between her job at Nexlify and her loyalty to Lily. But tonight she was here, a thumb drive dangling from her hand. "Hey, Ethan," Mia said, plopping down beside Lily. "Got something for you. And the boys." Ethan raised an eyebrow, setting his mug down. "What's that?" Mia hesitated, glancing at Lily, who nodded. "It's a video from 6 years ago. Lily made it the day she left before she sent that email Lucas found. I kept it all this time, figured she'd hate me for showing you, but you need to see it." Ethan's stomach flipped. "Why now?" "Because they're pissed at you," Mia said bluntly, "and this might fix it, or at least help 'em understand." Lily stiffened, her mug trembling. "Mia, I told you to delete that." "I know," Mia said softer, "but I couldn't. It's you, Lil Raw and Real. They deserve it. He does too." Ethan looked between them, then held out his hand. "Play it." Mia plugged the drive into her phone, pulling up a grainy video. The screen flickered, and there was Lily, 6 years younger, hair longer, sitting on a couch in their old Oakland apartment. Her eyes were red, her voice shaky, a pregnancy test clutched in her lap. "Ethan," Video Lily said, staring into the camera. "I don't know if you'll ever see this. I'm leaving today. Found out I'm pregnant. Triplets, can you believe it? I wanted to tell you so bad, but you're gone. Not here. Not really. Nexlify's your baby now, and I get it. It's your dream. So I'm gonna let you have it. I'll raise them myself, keep them safe, give them everything I can. Don't hate me for this. I just hope one day you figure out what matters." The video cut off, Lily's face frozen mid-sob. Ethan's chest caved in, the air sucked out of him. He'd been in a meeting that day, pitching to Google, too wired to notice her packing. She'd been crying, scared, and he'd missed it all. Lily wiped her eyes, voice low. "I never sent it. Wrote the email instead. Didn't think you'd care." "I would've," he said, hoarse. "If I'd seen that, I'd have—" "Would you?" she asked, echoing their old fights. "You were a ghost, Ethan." He didn't argue. Couldn't. Mia stood, brushing off her jeans. "Show the boys. They need to see her side." Ethan nodded, shaky but sure. "Call 'em over." Lily hesitated, then shouted, "Ryan! Lucas! Noah! Come here a sec!" The boys trudged over, sweaty and grumbling, the soccer ball bouncing to a stop. Ryan crossed his arms, still wary. "What's up?" Ethan held up Mia's phone, his voice rough. "Your aunt's got something you need to see. About your mom. And me." Mia hit play, and they watched. 3 blonde heads huddled around the screen, eyes wide. Video Lily's words filled the night, raw and broken, and when it ended, the silence was thick enough to choke on. Lucas was first to crack, tears streaking his dirt-smudged face. "She was alone," he whispered, looking at Lily. "You didn't tell us that." Lily knelt, pulling him close. "I didn't want you to hate him. He's here now. That's what matters." Ryan turned to Ethan, voice small. "You really didn't know?" "No," Ethan said, meeting his gaze. "I was a dumbass, Ryan. Missed everything, but I'm not missing this. Not anymore." Noah stepped forward, book tucked under his arm, eyes sharp. "Why'd you quit Nexlify? Was it 'cause of us?" "Yeah," Ethan said, no hesitation. "And 'cause I've got 6 months left. Brain tumor. Done hiding it." The boys froze, processing. Lucas wiped his nose, voice cracking. 6 months? Like, you're dying?" Ethan nodded, the weight lifting a little as he said it out loud. "Yeah. So I'm here. Every damn day I've got. Till I can't be." Ryan's lip trembled, but he squared his shoulders. "We're mad. But we don't want you to go, Dad." "Me neither," Ethan said, pulling them into a hug. Awkward, messy, real. They clung to him, all 3, and Lily joined, her arms around them all. Mia hung back, smiling through tears. "I'm sorry," Ethan whispered into their hair, "for all of it." "We know," Noah said, muffled against his chest. "Just stay." "I will," he promised, the clock ticking louder, but softer somehow. 5 years later, the backyard in Half Moon Bay was different. Treehouse finished, a sign nailed to the trunk, Carter Brothers Tech Lab. Ryan, Lucas, and Noah, 15 now, sat inside, laptops open, coding under the same string lights. Ryan was taller, captain of the robotics team, headed to MIT. Lucas had a buzz cut and a hackathon trophy on the shelf. Noah, still quiet, had a quantum physics paper pending at CERN, but they were still them, arguing over code, laughing at dumb jokes, a trio forged in fire. Lily climbed up, ducking under the low door, a worn leather journal in her hand, Ethan's last gift, one of 3 he'd left them. "Found another one," she said, grinning. Ryan took the laptop, pulling up Nexlify's old codebase, public now, after Jake sold the company. "Check it. An Easter egg in the traffic AI, line 528. Noah read it aloud, voice steady. "Family's my greatest algorithm. Love, Dad." Lucas smirked, wiping his eyes. He was such a nerd. "Yeah," Ryan said, smiling. "Our nerd." Lily sat with them, flipping open the journal. Ethan's handwriting, shaky but clear, full of lessons and love. "He'd be proud," she said. "You're his best code." They nodded, heads bent over the screen, the night wrapping around them like a hug. Downstairs, the red door glowed, and somewhere, Ethan's last algorithm ran on, imperfect, human, eternal. Wow, what a ride. Ethan's gone, but his legacy's alive in those boys. How'd this hit you? Smash subscribe and drop a comment. What's your takeaway from his story? Tell me below. The ballroom at the Fairmont Hotel in San Francisco shimmered like something out of a Hollywood movie. Crystal chandeliers dangled from the high ceiling, throwing soft light across the white orchids lining every table. The air smelled faintly of expensive perfume and money. Lots of it. Ethan Carter, all 42 years of him, stood in the middle of it all, tugging at the collar of his Armani tuxedo. The Notes app glowed with half-finished letters. Dear Ryan, Dear Lucas, Dear Noah. Pages he'd been writing since the diagnosis, stuffing them with everything he wouldn't get to say. First goals, first breakups, college fights. He'd barely scratched the surface. The back door creaked, and Mia Harper, Lily's younger sister, stepped out, her PR blazer swapped for jeans and a Giants hoodie.